So what exactly makes a particular production cue licensable? And what is it about some of these professional tracks that you've heard, or maybe you've done some research on, that makes them so viable and marketable in the marketplace? And more importantly, what should you be noticing about these tracks as you use them for inspiration as reference tracks? Not copying them, of course, but just trying to study how it is they do what they do. So I'm going to be launching a new series here on this channel, and what I'm going to do essentially is break down what I perceive as extremely high quality production music in pretty much every genre you can think of. And so here's what I need from you. I'm going to start off this series with just a swagger rock track, which some might think it's a little bit of a dated series or a dated sound or style. I frankly have been seeing some great placements on my royalties with some of the swagger rock that I've done, so I don't think by far at all it's dead. For some of you that are interested in getting into this style of music, this is going to be a very insightful and helpful video for you. But if you don't do swagger rock, I need you to comment below and let me know, what should I do next? What style of music do you produce? What do you want me to break down? What genres or moods or focuses do you want me to cover in my next breakdown video? And I'll be happy to do it for you guys, okay? So even though I've done a lot of swagger rock, I'm not going to be reviewing one of my own tracks because, frankly, honestly, this is way better than anything I've ever done in my career. This is a track called Can't Be Beaten. It's off of Brand X. It's basically a really high quality production catalog. It's by a composer named Richard Chance. Richard, excellent work, my friend. If you ever do want to come on the channel and talk about your work, you're always welcome to do it, but I just wanted to give you a little bit of shine, a little bit of praise, and obviously use your track as a shining example of what we should be shooting for when we want to potentially start pitching and producing swagger rock. If you don't know, swagger rock can do really well with promos and commercials. It can do great with sports. It can do great with reality. There's many different uses. It's a very versatile style of music. And if you don't know what swagger rock is, well, let's just get into this track and we'll take a listen to it. So it's a fairly short one. It's only a minute and a half. But what I'll do is, as it's going through, I'll probably pause it here and there and kind of let you know what's happening in the track, why I feel that those particular sections are there, what you should be noticing about this, and how you should be emulating and using these sort of golden rules in your production music to make your tracks much more licensable and ready for TV placements, okay? Let's take a listen and start with Can't Be Beaten. Here we go. Okay, if you noticed, I just subconsciously, not controlling it, started to nod along to this song. If you have a pulse and a heart rate, you probably did the same thing. That is so important, especially with swagger rock, that even though I'm going to get into the weeds of this on this track and really kind of pull out what I feel is really working about it, don't get so lost in the weeds and the technical aspects of creating music that you forget the most important thing, which is you need to move the bodies of the people that are listening to your music. So this riff, these drums, this rhythm, the swagger, the attitude, it's oozing out of this track. It's well written. It's a great riff. And it just has that right feeling and that right attitude that you can't help but nod along and go forward with this track and be pulled along with it. So as you're composing, if you're not doing that to your own music subconsciously and going like, oh, wow, I've been like nodding my head, didn't even think about doing that, you're onto something really, really good. There might be some little tweaks you can do to make it stronger, but that's kind of like the big, binary pass or fail that we need to make sure that we're always kind of keeping in touch with. Is your music moving you physically? And that usually gives you a sign that you're actually doing something correct. So let's go back to the beginning here. As you heard, it was a very simple intro. Stomps and claps, kind of a rising sound effect. Let's hear what else is going on there. Just to get the energy moving, just to get you hyped up, pumped up, and obviously to deliver on this really amazing riff that he unleashed shortly after. So all you really heard, stomps and claps, this kind of like single note high guitar lead, kind of just pluck along up there. A rising sound effect that was like not overbearing, not in your face, sort of slowly, subtly under the surface, that was kind of rising and rising and rising and going further up. And then taking it up even a further notch for this last little part of the build-up. Let's listen to how he did that. So the lead guitar cuts out. There's this little stuttering kind of almost trailer-like build-up sound effect right there. That's the part where you see it coming in. Then we have this sort of false start for the riff, right? So right there would be where a lot of producers might just go, all right, 1, 2, 3, 4, riff, here we go. But he treated this kind of like a trailer track in that he gave you a little false ending where it's like, doo, a little bass drop down. We're not ready for it yet. And then wham, he hits us with this really high quality riff. Little stutter there at the end. You notice that? Little tiny attention to detail that maybe you didn't hear the first time around. There was a da-doom. It was like a little bit of a stutter going into that guitar riff, a little bit of a kick kind of pattern happening there, cutting off that bass drop right before that happened. Tiny microscopic little move like that. What that does is that basically gives you a little bit of a change of pace, a little bit of a kind of a nice, pleasant surprise, and obviously a little bit of a shock, a little bit of a, we're about to kick you in the gut, kick you in the belly sort of a feel. And that's exactly what you're going to do with this riff. Now let's break down this riff as it comes in. The first thing you notice is there's a big crash cymbal. Usually what you want to do, especially after a big buildup like this and a kind of a false start to it, that bass drop down, and then you're going to release into kind of a chorus or a main riff. You usually want to have either a crash cymbal if it's swagger rock, or if it's EDM, you want a white noise release. You want something that kind of gives you a big, imagine fireworks going off as you get into it. So obviously as we start this part, you hear them with the crash cymbal and obviously the full drums coming in here. So just that riff right there, that's basically the sort of main riff progression right there. What I want you to notice is the call and response aspect to this and how this riff stays away from becoming too repetitive, which is a very common note that I give a lot of our members in pro feedback, which is cool riffs, but they're just happening too often. You're repeating them over and over and over again. It sounds like you're copy and pasting your way through this track. Notice it starts off with a great guitar riff, guitar goes away, a little bit of a pause, and you hear these really great vocals come in, right? The guitar just has a little bit of that kind of feedback, almost tension, just sitting there, lingering there. And it just gives you a feeling of like, ooh, we're not quite settled. We're going to come right back into that guitar riff. So little tiny things like this. So the second time through, though, he doesn't have the pause. The first time is dun 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 rest. Second time, he ends with an actual kind of final hit or a final sort of end of his guitar riff right here. But still has a little bit of a pause right before we repeat the riff. Now, this is essentially the full progression there. We have the call and response, the guitar is the response that comes in with the vocals, then we have the guitar coming back in, even some response with the vocals here as well. Now, what you should never do with sync licensing production cues is just take what you did there and copy and paste it exactly to basically go, well, this verse or this chorus needs to be a little bit longer. Let me just copy and paste the whole thing over here. And that's obviously not what we do here with Richard's cue. So let's take a listen to how he still repeats what he just did, but adds new flavor, new flair, and new sounds. Let's take a listen. Not a lot different. Can you tell what the difference is? I'll play the first part again, and we'll come back to the second part. Let me know if you can tell what the subtle difference is. Okay, hi-hat and snare, the biggest things that you notice now all of a sudden. Two instruments that make a huge difference in terms of the vibe of this riff, of the momentum of the riff, of where it's building. You can definitely feel that we are building much further now simply by adding a hi-hat and a snare. And sometimes that's as simple as these changes need to be. So one thing that I will encourage a lot of you guys to do is to think smaller as you begin your progressions. Because a lot of people will want to start their chorus with the full drums going banging and going crazy. But had you not done that, you just started here like with just the stomps and the claps, you can build into the full drums. I feel like he added just a little bit of a hide, either the guitar or a pad, or just some sort of a little bit of an extra tension there. Almost not noticeable though. If you listen to the first and the second half, you almost didn't pick up on that. But there's something in that's just kind of like, it's just in there, right? But it's not distracting, and it's not pulling your attention away from the music, and it's not annoying. It's definitely just adding to the music underneath. This is definitely another very common note that I give a lot of our members is sometimes when we add sound effects or pads or something to try to add this tension, it's a delicate touch, and a lot of times less is more. If we add too much of a sound effect like that and it's way too much in the foreground, it starts to sound like, I call it like a mosquito. There's a mosquito in the mix, and it's kind of annoying and obnoxious, and it's in this frequency range that's just really, really abrasive, and it's taking away my enjoyment of the music. This is just a perfect balance of pushing it just a little bit to add a little bit more tension on this sort of second riff. So let's continue on with the track, and let's see where he goes from here. Back a little bit. B section here, okay? So before we go into this breakdown, basically a 2-note breakdown. Bum 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 bum. A repeat. Bum 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 bum. Then when he repeats it all again, you heard the higher, I guess it was a guitar, maybe it was like a guitar slash synth sort of a sound, kind of a cool thing that came up on top. So again, more than a repeat of that would have been a little bit too repetitive. The track would have felt a little stale, and it's like, it's not really going anywhere. But really, what a great structure of this track, right? So you had this A section repeated again. Second time we repeated it, you have this the full drums coming in, a little bit more of that kind of tension, guitar synth sound coming in. Then we go to a B section, which is completely just different chords, a different pacing, a little bit more of a rest, right? It doesn't feel as intense as your A section, which is good. So you're giving your editor or your music supervisor various styles or directions or choices and options in this swagger rock track that they've offered, and it still feels like it belongs to that first riff as an appropriate B section. So it's but it doesn't feel so different that you're like, whoa, where did we go? We're in a completely different world. No, it's very, very still focused in the swagger rock direction. So I'll play that one more time so you can kind of catch how he did it. Now, kind of a sort of surprising twist right there. Like a lot of producers, I myself might have extended that one more bar, because it's like the first half was 2 progressions. Why not have this new progression last twice as long for whatever reason? It probably was the right choice. We didn't need to further go down that road, and it was a nice little kind of surprise of like, hey, we're just going to end this B section here. We've given you enough variation on it, and now we're going to do a break section. So this is one of these interesting scenarios where a 3 progression, essentially a 3-bar progression, is used rather than 4, which is what we would actually do. So some surprise, I'm seeing some elements and some very good use of elemental surprise and structural surprise with this track, which is kind of interesting. So let's get into this breakdown and how we're going to build ourselves back up into the final big monumental chorus. And usually with sync licensing, that's kind of how your tracks are going to get structured. You will start off your track in a certain level, let's call it like 6 or 7 out of 10. By the last chorus or the last act of your track, that's where you let it all come out, and you should be at a 9 or a 10 in intensity in terms of the new elements and new production elements that you sort of throw in there. So let's go into this breakdown and how we're going to finish up this track. So let's just go and just listen to it again. Just pay attention to what's happening, what's there, what's not there, how are new elements being added as it continues on, okay? So obviously that bass is kind of driving it, right? That really cool, really driving, got those 16th notes just cranking out there, really going well. Just the stomps in the beginning, right? You don't have the claps coming in, so it's very, very minimal. And I think you had that little high guitar note at the beginning. Let's check it out. And you can hear that little bit of a whistling, rising sound effect, right? Woo! It's kind of in the very high. It's very, very subtle, but it's in there. Kind of gives you a siren feeling, right? Something is going to happen. We are going up the roller coaster. This is an excellent use of this. Then we obviously have the tambourine coming in, and we have the claps that are going to come in. And then pretty simple little drum fill to top it all off. So not monumental, not extremely complex, but genius at the same time, because there's not so much happening here where it's hard to kind of keep up with it or be pulled in by it. It's just enough to kind of go, okay, yeah, we're going somewhere. And what's really cool about this is now with this one cue, you've got this type of buildup. So let's say somebody has a promo and they really want to hype up their audience, they can use this. But if that's not the right vibe for what they're going for, they got the intro buildup. So this is what we mean by providing options to production music libraries. This is one cue, but already we've got 6, 7 different sort of mini cues that are built in with it. All focused, all in the same style, the same genre, same emotional mood, right? It's hitting the same tone. But you're giving whoever wants to place your music all these different options. I would not be surprised if this track and this album called Swagger Rock Volume 1 has been placed ungodly amounts of times. It's just so good. It's so well crafted, and there's so much that we can learn from cues like this. So let's jump into this last drum fill, into the last chorus, and see if you can notice. It's a very subtle difference. What is different? What is added to this last chorus that we didn't hear on the last one? Let's take a listen. If it's not obvious, let me just play that last chorus again, the first time we heard it, so you can kind of A/B compare it. Here's the first time we heard it. And again, the last one. Probably the guitar lead is what you're noticing, and that's really the only main difference from that first time we heard the chorus to this final finale. Other thing I did notice is I think the vocals were pushed up just a little bit more on this last one because they just became more noticeable. I feel like they bumped it up just a few dB to make those vocals a little bit more of a prominent feature in this last chorus. They were there in the other chorus, but they just weren't as prominent. So I think there was a little bit of a boost up there. But really just those really interesting, cool, noodling guitar leads that are in there, but not bashing you across the head, as you notice. It's a nice, subtle mix of the music is still driving it, it's still a riff-oriented track, but those guitar leads are kind of adding as more basically tension and more kind of like wild energy. That's almost like the flames that are dancing on top of the track. Okay, so that's really what's happening there. So again, always for that last chorus, add something. It could be drums, new drums. It could be a new guitar, maybe new vocals that you haven't heard before, a new synth, new percussion. There could be many different ways you can do this, but usually you want this last chorus to be the big finale one that has new elements and a new kind of twist on the chorus that we haven't heard before. Last but certainly not least, very, very important, what a lot of producers will do at the end of their last chorus is just go 1, 2, 3, 4, hit, and then just have a definite ending. You definitely need to have a definite hit ending at the end of your track. Don't get me wrong. We don't do fade outs with production music, but I'm going to show you how a little extra on this track will get this track much more placements and make it much more versatile, and explain why. So here's how this track ends, and just notice that it just doesn't stop on the 1 at the end of the chorus. There's an additional bar that's created to make sure that this has a really nice, solid final ending. You notice that last little ending, because he could have just ended it with... That could have been the last end. And that would have been it. You know, not a bad ending for sure. But he added this extra little twist at it. The reason why you don't want to always just end your track on the 1 after your chorus is because what we have to deliver for a lot of these production music libraries is called a sting version of our tracks, which is essentially usually a 3 to 5 second cut down of your track, which is used for promos, advertisements, sports. primarily because it gets you in and out of commercial breaks. Probably 30 to 40% of the placements I've had in my career are coming from alt mixes, specifically sting mixes. And so what I learned fairly early on in my career is that if I can give them a little extra squeeze of juice at the end, a little bit of an extra, something you haven't heard the rest of the track, again, a new option for how to get out of my track, they can use this little ending right there. They can cut it, basically what they hear here. It's awesome. You can pop that on the end of any one of these other parts of the track. So they can basically Frankenstein this track any way they need to. And they've got this really cool, interesting ending to be able to get them out of there any way they need to. Okay, so one thing that you'll find is libraries will love you even more if you can just take that extra 10% of time and give your ending. Usually how I like to do it is something very similar to this, where it's sort of like a false ending. You think the track is going to end, maybe there's a hit, and then it comes back in with a drum fill or a guitar noodle or a guitar lead or a riff like this, and then you have your final ending. So it's almost like a trailer ending where you have this fake false ending, which could be used as a real cutout if they needed it. But then you're giving them, again, one more option of like, if you really want to get out of this track a different way, here's another cool way you can do it. And yes, you usually want to end on the root note. The note that you started on is usually what you want to end on, and that's exactly what this cue did. So those are my thoughts on it. 136 might be a little bit short for some libraries, obviously not for Brand X. A lot of the other tracks on the album I'm looking at here are around between 130 and 2. Some of them are a little bit over 2. 2 to 3 minutes is usually what you want to go for, but again, for different styles of music, you can go for different lengths. But this is essentially what I'm teaching you guys how to do in Sync Edge, and when I give you guys notes and pro feedback, this is essentially where I'm guiding you from my experience in this business, spending a lot of time myself studying tracks like this, really analyzing what's working, why does it get placements, why are these tracks getting accepted. Not to mention, one thing I didn't even mention at all in this video so far is the quality of this track, okay? And the quality of the instruments. It feels live. It feels like you're in the room with these musicians, or you're at a bar with them, right? It's not overly crowded. There's not a million different things happening. It's actually really just focused on high quality samples, high quality riffs, and a great track structure, and not getting too repetitive. And again, adding new elements as we repeat things, making sure that we give a payoff when we have our build-ups and our tension sections, all that good stuff, adding a little bit extra on that sting ending, all these kinds of things, okay? So these are these golden rules that I've been telling you guys about for years here on this channel. So I thought maybe videos like this can help exemplify it by having you follow along and listen. So now it's your turn. What did you think about this? Was this insightful? Was this helpful? And most importantly, where should I go next? I will definitely use your comments as my guide for where we're going to take this series. So please don't be shy. Comment below.